I must admit I'm a huge fan of March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament. I like it better than the World Series, the run-up leading to the Super Bowl. I like it better than all of those things. I find it such great fun watching unknown players who had been passed over by the big-name schools play their hearts out and sometimes unexpectedly win. I have an older sister who is a physician. She is retired now, but she is still on the faculty of the medical school at Loyola of Chicago. And Loyola of Chicago is in the tournament and they've won 2 games. 2 games, a huge underdog in both of them. So we are praying this morning for Loyola of Chicago. The games, really, they are such high drama. and I must admit, I relish the glory of it all. The little team that knocks off the giants. And really, don't we all relish encounters with the glorious? I mean, aren't we drawn to the grand, the beautiful, the majestic, and the powerful? We Catholics, for the most part, we like our churches to be glorious. We like our architecture to speak of the splendor and the majesty of a God who is all-powerful. It's here in our churches that we worship God's glory, where God is high and lifted up, utterly beyond us, triumphant, holding the whole universe in being. Isn't it glorious when Nancy pounds out some majestic piece on the organ that lifts our hearts? And then we encounter Jesus in today's gospel. It's getting near the end. The powers around him are closing in. And what does he say? The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. I am troubled now. Yet what should I say? Father, save me from this hour? But it was for this purpose that I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. We hear of a very different kind of glory. Jesus knows that he's going to face his death, that he will have to give up everything. But he also knows that somehow this giving up is the key to real glory. It is in giving himself to God's will for his life that he shows God's glory. Holy Week begins next week, and we're going to watch Jesus ride into a town on a donkey. And we'll see him kneel down and wash his disciples' feet and dry them with a towel. He will stagger as he drags a massive wooden cross, the instrument of his own painful death. And he will have a piercing crown of thorns thrust on his head. And all of this will force us to rethink what glory actually is. Jesus will be changing its definition right before our eyes. This glory isn't something we achieve. It's not a crown of victory that we get to wear when we come out on top. It's not about a victory at all. In fact, it's just the opposite. You want to see glory? He asks his disciples. Okay, then listen to this. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. He's talking about himself, and he's telling us that the way to glory lies through letting go, dying to one's way of living, so something new can grow. God needs those cracks and those broken places in our lives and in our world to get in. You and I cannot grow without something in us dying, and Jesus puts this to us as starkly as he can. We can't be obedient to what God is calling us to be and do without being willing to let go. And that's the hard truth of it. A grain of wheat can't do what it was meant to do unless it falls to the earth and begins to slowly crack open and push out fresh shoots of new life. We see this glory that Jesus speaks about in our lives all the time. I recently read a brief excerpt from a memoir that the journalist Calvin Trillin had published about his wife Alice. And Alice had recently died of cancer. And in the piece that I read, Trillin describes Alice's belief in what he called the transformative power of pure, undiluted love. Well, it seems that Alice volunteered every summer in a camp for handicapped children. And one year she wrote this about her experience. Last summer, the camper I got closest to was a magical child who was severely disabled. She had 2 genetic diseases, one which kept her from growing and one which kept her from digesting any food. She had to be fed through a tube at night, and she had so much difficulty walking that I drove her around in a golf cart a lot. One day when we were playing Duck, Duck, Goose, I was sitting beside her and she asked me to hold her mail for her while she took her turn to be chased around the table, the circle. I had time to see that on the top of the pile was a note from her mom. Then, she says, she did something that she called truly awful. She decided to read the note. I simply had to know what the child's parents could have done to make her so spectacular, to make her the most optimistic, most enthusiastic, most hopeful human being I had ever encountered. She snuck a quick look at the note, and her eyes fell on this sentence: if God had given us all of the children in the world to choose from, we would only have chosen you. And then, before the child got back to her place in the circle, Alice showed the note to a counselor sitting next to her. Quick, read this, she said. It's the secret of life. There it is. Glory in the measureless love of a parent for her child. The glory we see in self-sacrifice, in letting go, in serving. That's the glory Jesus is about to show us. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified, Jesus says. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it produces much fruit.